When the subway doors hissed shut and the train lurched forward, the last thing anyone expected was a sudden act of chaos in the calm. It was just another regular afternoon rush hour in New York City. People buried in their phones, others bobbing, their heads to music, and a few exchanging tired glances after a long day. But in the blink of an eye, that routine was shattered. The thief was slick, probably thought he was smarter than the rest. He scanned the car like a predator, picking out the weakest target. His eyes locked onto an elderly woman clutching her handbag tightly against her side. She was seated by the door, the kind of vulnerable target that seemed easy to exploit. He edged closer, pretending to check his phone as the train clattered beneath them. Then, swift as lightning, he lunged. He yanked the purse and bolted toward the opposite door, expecting them to open at the next stop. Gasps filled the car. The woman shrieked. Some passengers froze. Others jumped up, but none moved fast enough, except for one. Karoline Leavitt. She'd been seated only a few feet away, quiet, observant. Not everyone recognized her immediately. After all, in the hustle of NYC, even well-known figures can move through a crowd without drawing attention. But Karoline wasn't just any passenger. The former congressional candidate, spokesperson, and seasoned media warrior had been quietly watching everything unfold. She stood up fast, faster than anyone anticipated. With zero hesitation, she charged down the narrow subway aisle. The thief, sensing someone was on his tail, panicked. He tried weaving through standing passengers, jostling a man in a suit and nearly knocking over a teenager with headphones. But Karoline stayed on him. "Stop him!" she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. That command triggered something. People around her finally snapped out of their shock. A tall man instinctively stepped sideways, blocking part of the thief's path. The thief dodged, stumbled slightly, and that was all the opening Karoline needed. She closed the gap and grabbed the thief's hoodie from behind, yanking him backward with a force he clearly didn't expect. He flailed, trying to break free, but Karoline had the grip of someone who wasn't letting go. A struggle ensued, wild and messy, arms flying and bodies bumping into handrails and poles. But Karoline held on. In that moment, she wasn't thinking about politics or headlines. She wasn't thinking about whether someone had a camera rolling. She was just doing what she knew was right. Other passengers quickly joined. One man helped restrain the thief's arms. Another woman picked up the stolen purse that had fallen to the floor. Within seconds, the would-be escape artist was pinned down on the subway floor, outmatched and overwhelmed. When the train finally screeched to a halt at the next station, the doors opened to the sound of distant sirens already approaching. Someone had hit the emergency alert. Transit cops were waiting on the platform, alerted by Karoline and others during the chaos. The thief was handed off without resistance, his confidence now replaced by a look of disbelief. The elderly woman, shaken but unharmed, was helped to her feet. She reached for her recovered purse with tears in her eyes. She tried to speak, but her gratitude came out in broken words. Karoline just gave her a reassuring smile and a hand on the shoulder. Within minutes, the story began to travel. First on the phones of those on board, then to social media, and soon after, to the headlines. Videos surfaced showing the chase, the takedown, the moment Karoline stood up and ran toward the danger instead of away from it. And while some were surprised, others weren't at all. Karoline Leavitt had always been a fighter. On the debate stage, on the campaign trail, in interviews where she held her ground under pressure, she'd proven her grit time and again. But this moment was different. This wasn't about policy or partisanship. This was raw, real courage. An instinct to act when others hesitated. And that's what struck people the most. In an age where bystanders often default to recording instead of intervening, Karoline reminded everyone what action looks like. Not for likes, not for clout, but because someone needed help and she could help. That subway car could have been a scene of loss and fear. Instead, it became a scene of bravery, and not the kind people only talk about in theory, but the kind captured in motion, in real time, with real consequences. The video spread fast. Millions of views within hours. News outlets picked it up. Headlines flashed. Karoline Leavitt stops thief on NYC subway. Purse snatcher didn't know who he was messing with. From politics to heroics, Leavitt jumps into action. Sometimes they sit quietly, minding their own business, until the moment calls for more. In the days that followed, the ripple effect of Karoline's actions spread far beyond New York. Talk shows discussed it, commentators analyzed it, and social media couldn't stop replaying the scene. But beyond the hype, something deeper began to settle in people's minds. It wasn't just about a purse being saved or a thief being caught. It was about the idea that courage isn't reserved for uniforms or badges. It's something that lives in ordinary people who make extraordinary choices in seconds. Karoline's inbox flooded with messages, from people thanking her for being brave, from parents who showed the video to their kids as an example, and from strangers who admitted they weren't sure they would have had the guts to do what she did. Some called her a role model, others simply called her what she proved herself to be that day, a protector. But for Karoline, it wasn't about praise. She kept saying the same thing. If we want to live in a society where people look out for each other, we have to start by being willing to step in. That moment on the subway wasn't staged, it wasn't rehearsed, it was raw, fast, and real. And maybe that's what made it powerful. Because deep down, people are tired of feeling like no one steps up anymore. Tired of thinking kindness and courage are fading. Karoline proved they're not. She reignited something, not just in the passengers who witnessed it firsthand, but in the millions who watched it later and felt something stir, a memory of what community looks like, of what it means to take responsibility, even when it's not required. And let's not forget the thief. He didn't just lose a stolen purse that day, he lost the illusion that people won't fight back, that people don't care, that society will let you get away with hurting others unnoticed. He picked the wrong target, sure. But more than that, he picked the wrong moment in history, because this isn't a time where we let cowards go unchecked. This is a time when people like Karoline Leavitt are riding the same subway as everyone else, ready to act. So the next time someone says the world is too far gone, show them this. Show them the video. Show them Karoline charging down the aisle. Show them a thief being taken down not by force but by sheer bravery and the will to protect someone who couldn't protect herself. Because this story isn't just about one act of heroism. It's about the possibility that any one of us on any given day in the middle of our normal routine might become the unexpected hero in someone else's life. Karoline didn't plan to go viral. She didn't plan to make a statement, but in that moment, she became the statement. And now, every time that train runs through the city, it carries the echo of that day. That courage is still alive, justice can still be swift, and real leadership doesn't always come from behind a podium. Sometimes it runs down a subway car, grabs a thief by the hoodie, and reminds the world that goodness still fights back. And that echo hasn't faded. In fact, it's grown louder. The MTA released a short statement, commending Karoline's bravery and reminding the public to remain vigilant, but even they couldn't help but note the rarity of such a direct and courageous intervention. Transit officers who arrived on the scene reportedly shook her hand and thanked her for her quick thinking, saying it likely prevented someone from getting seriously hurt. More than a few riders on that train admitted they felt safer just knowing someone like her was out there. One commuter, who witnessed the entire event, later posted, "She didn't even hesitate. It was like something out of a movie, but it was real, and it reminded me that heroes still walk among us." Karoline's actions also sparked a broader conversation about the role of civilians in public safety, about the power of community response, and about what it truly means to be accountable for the world around you. Media outlets began replaying the video alongside commentary, and Karoline, though initially reluctant, accepted a few interview requests to set the record straight. "I'm not a cop. I'm not trained in combat," she said during one interview. "But I was raised to stand up for people, to protect what's right. That's not about politics. That's about being human." That line hit hard. It circulated online, shared with captions like, We need more Carolines, and this is leadership in action. She was invited to speak at a community safety event the following week, where she focused not on herself, but on how everyone, no matter their background, has the power to make a difference. She emphasized awareness, unity, and the value of courage in small, everyday moments. It's not always about tackling a thief, she said to the crowd. Sometimes it's standing up for someone being bullied, helping someone who's lost, speaking up when you see something wrong. Courage starts small. And maybe that's why the story stuck. Because it wasn't just about the moment, it was about what the moment represented. People saw in Karoline what they hoped still existed in the world: conviction without hesitation, strength without arrogance, and action without ego. The elderly woman, now known only as Mrs. P in interviews, later sent a handwritten note to Karoline. It read, "You didn't just save my purse, you saved my belief in people. I'll never forget what you did for me." That letter now sits framed in Karoline's apartment, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that real change doesn't always come from grand gestures. It comes from being present, being bold, and doing what's right when no one expects you to. And so, life moved on. The subway kept running. New Yorkers returned to their daily grind. But something was different. People looked up a little more. They noticed their surroundings. Maybe they even thought, if something happened, what would I do? Because Karoline Leavitt raised the bar, not just for public figures, but for all of us. The thief, meanwhile, now faces charges and a very different kind of spotlight, one where his actions are a cautionary tale, and his arrogance is met with the reality that the world isn't as indifferent as he thought. And Karolina? She went right back to her work, her causes, her mission. But now, she walks through this world with more than a voice. She walks with the respect of a city that saw who she really is, not just when the cameras were on, but when the stakes were real. So next time you're on a subway, a bus, or just walking down the street, look around, because you never know who's standing beside you. It could be a fellow commuter, a stranger with earbuds in, or it could be someone like Karoline Leavitt. And if you're lucky, maybe, just maybe, it'll be someone who's not afraid to stand up and run toward the trouble, so the rest of us don't have to. Because heroes? They're real, and one of them rides the subway. And the best part? She's not done yet. Karoline Leavitt didn't just have a moment. She became a movement. In the weeks that followed the subway incident, people across the country began sharing their own stories. Stories of stepping in, standing up, or simply doing the right thing when no one was watching. Some credited her with inspiring them. Others admitted they'd been too afraid to act in the past, but now they'd think twice before staying silent. The hashtag #OursBeLikeCaroline trended for days, not because she asked for it, not because she launched a campaign, but because people were hungry for a reminder that integrity still matters, that guts still count, and that one person really can make a difference. Schools invited her to speak to students about courage. Self-defense instructors reached out to offer free workshops to anyone who wanted to feel more prepared, more confident. A few local leaders even began discussions about how to make public spaces safer, not just through policing, but through public engagement and community response. It was a spark, and it lit something bigger than just that one train car. Even Karoline's critics, those who had previously disagreed with her politics, paused to acknowledge what she'd done. Because there's something universal about protecting someone in need, about refusing to look away. In that moment, labels didn't matter. What mattered was action. And that's what she became known for. Not just what she says, but what she does. There was even a mural painted in a Brooklyn subway station. Not a huge one, just a small piece near the platform. It showed the silhouette of a woman mid-stride, hand reaching out, bold letters above her reading. "Courage takes no sides." Underneath, in smaller text, "Inspired by Karoline Leavitt." When Karoline saw it, she didn't post a selfie. She didn't tweet about it, she just stood there quietly for a minute, then nodded and walked on. Because the truth is, She never did any of this to be famous. She just believes in something simple. If you can help, you should. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Not everyone will have their subway moment. Not everyone will get the chance to chase down a criminal, but everyone will have a chance at some point to do something that matters. To speak up, to protect, to show courage. And when that time comes, maybe we'll remember this story. Maybe we'll think of a woman who didn't wait, didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. She just stood up and ran. Not for glory, not for politics, but because someone needed help, and she was there. That's the power of one person. That's the story of Karoline Leavitt. And that's the kind of story this world needs more of.